Welcome to another episode of Challenging the Norm. Here's and hers look at life and business with your hosts, Paul Snell and myself, Lindsay Burden. The podcast for solopreneurs, entrepreneurs, and business owners that want to experience success in their own way. Wrestling with the topics that matter and reality checking the latest trends in business. Paul works with business owners, showing them how they can take the stress out of transforming teams into performance powerhouses that love what they do, while I offer business coaching that empowers ambitious women in business to create financial abundance and a time-rich lifestyle without sacrificing their joy. Well, here we are again, Paul, and I am super excited about this episode because I've got a bit of a bee in my bonnet, if I'm honest. So, hello, how are you before we get to my bee?
Well, I'm well. The sun is shining, as I like to say at these things. Either the sun is shining or it's not. Today is shining. So the world is in a good place. So I'm raring to go for this one.
The world is in a good place.
Ah.
See, now you've poked the bear. I've gone from bees to bear. I am struggling at the moment. I am struggling with what I'm seeing, what I'm reading, particularly on LinkedIn, which is where I spend most of my time. So we're here recording in the UK. And as people may or may not know, we're in 2024. Had to think what year we're in. So we've had a new government recently, which for us means another prime minister. But we've got a new government. It's all change. And we've recently had a budget. And what I've noticed is these posts around, this is terrible, this is awesome, I'm taking my business to, pick somewhere nice and hot and sunny. This is, terrible, the world's going to end, the UK is the worst place in the world to be, da-da-da-da-da-da. Oh, and also we've had an election in America. Which I feel we can't really talk about because we're not there. We don't know what it's like to live there. So I'm not going to put that into the equation. But I'm feeling a bit like everyone is doing this, oh, isn't it awful? We've all got to do this. And they're feeding the fear that's already established or the anxiety around it being a really tough year, which is what we were saying before we hit record, wasn't it? Let's face it, it has been a really tough year. But now I'm just seeing all this stuff, Paul, and it's like, really, well, first I go, are you really leaving the UK? Are you really taking your business overseas? And then I think, why, it's such an extreme. And I worry about these extreme views that are then shared on social media, which I know is your pet hate.
Well, do you know what? It's a love-hate relationship with social media. Pick a day. I do see where you're coming from, and I think there's a couple of things that really get my goat, if you like. One is these things that we see on social media, albeit might be someone's gut reaction to something. It's also, is it true? Because the lack of fact often breeds anxiety in its own right.
Yeah, I agree.
And a good example would be leading up to the recent budget, because there've been so many stories about how bad it was going to be, what a disaster it's going to be, how are we going to cope. That in itself breeds anxiety. We hadn't even got to the fact,
No,
right? So social media, you're right. There's a lot of it. And my second point is people seem to love to do extremes. There's never middle ground. It's like, I'm going to leave the country. Are you? Are you really just going to leave the country? Now, I'm sure I'm going to get a list to challenge me on that and go, yeah, I did. But the reality is most people, if it is a knee-jerk reaction, which is what we're talking about here, most people do the knee-jerk reaction and say, I've really had enough. That was terrible. I'm leaving the country. It doesn't mean they're going to leave the country. And I think we have to get context here. Any knee-jerk reaction comes from what scientifically they call system one thinking. In other words, it's how you feel.
Yeah.
It's rarely how you think. It's how you feel. If you feel that it's going to be problematic, negative, or damaging, or gloomy, then you will react in that way. And honestly, I'll challenge anybody who tells me, no, 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 Paul, I'm in complete control. You're not wired to always be in control. You're wired to allow your intuition to be in control. That's where your knee jerk comes from.
It's really interesting because there's obviously the budget stuff. There was also something that's happened recently at school. And in fact, I flew off the handle about the school thing way more than I did the budget thing. But I just thinking about this, the thing that they're implementing at school. I won't bore everyone with it, but I was livid. I was
Mm.
fuming. I couldn't see how it was going to work. It was terrible. And I absolutely went for it. Far worse than the budget, actually. But you know what? In a few hours, something had happened, and I'd kind of calmed down. And that's, if we're not careful, we stay in that moment of
Mm.
agitation. We stay in that moment where it just feels awful. And we must stop, just take a breath,
Mm.
really think about it. And you're right. Is it true? Is it correct? Is it really going to happen? Are all these people going to leave? I mean, I think we've heard it before for around other decisions that were made by government. You know, this is all terrible. All the rich people are going to leave and they won't be paying their taxes. I don't know if they did. But is that panic moment? And and I'm sure you do. We see it in business, don't we? Something happens and it's that reaction. I've got to react. And it's that. And then we react and make decisions from that panic. And in that moment of panic, and that's dangerous.
It's hugely, and I always use this example of a panic moment,
Oh,
and that is, the reality to market crashes, they're rarely factual. If you want a market crash in 2008, it's really a factual issue. There are facts involved. What drives the domino effect is how people feel.
you react.
They all react. So if you see someone selling their shares in, I don't know, Morgan Stanley, and someone go, oh, Lindsay's just sold all her shares. Quick, dump your shares.
Yeah.
And they do it because they feel there's an indication there. No one's actually spoken to Lindsay and said, Lindsay, why did you sell your millions of Morgan Stanley shares? Right? But they react in an emotional way. So at the very highest level, we can have economic disaster by how someone feels in a knee jerk.
Yeah.
It is the same in a microscopic way for our small businesses and our listeners' small businesses. It's the same behavior. The challenge is the ability to share emotion has never been so available. It's
Yeah.
never been so instantaneous. So the thing that drives change at a macro level, for example, on a market level, there was a time where the London stock market, there were several hundred people screaming at each other in a room, right? So if someone reacted badly, that whole room got infected. Now
Yeah.
imagine that on a global scale.
Mm.
That's where the knee jerk stuff kicks in. And you're absolutely right. If we can't if we can't develop the mechanism to step back, and the one I use a lot with clients is between stimulus and response, there's always time.
Yeah.
So if we can't take a step back and without getting all deep and meaningful on this is a much bigger thing, this knee jerk stuff. But if we can't do that in our business to go, hang on a second, whoa, let's just step back a minute here. Are we seeing this the right way? And it's so much easier said than done. I know that. So people are going, yeah, it's easy for you to say that, Paul, but you're not in my state and it's not as bad as it is here that it is for you. That's still not the point. These things take time to develop. But what I would say, Lindsay, is knee-jerk reactions sometimes is necessary. That's the reason we've got to find balance and not simply try and behave our way out of doing knee jerk. Sometimes knee jerk is necessary and we are built for that. Our brains are wired for it. The problem is we've introduced stimulus outside of that wired context.
Yeah. And I just wanted to pick up on something that space and that gap that you talk about. So in that moment of I mean, I was on the roof. I was high after
Mm,
reading this particular letter from the school. And, if I'd been at my desk, I probably would have started to type a very strongly worded email, which I'd like to think I wouldn't have sent. However, I wasn't at my desk. So, I just took a breath a minute. And I thought, well, hang on a minute. I'll just see if the kids have been told about this and what they think. They hadn't even been told. So they didn't even know what was going on. So I didn't have their feelings. So I just went, oh, I'll just wait for that to happen. The minute I'd gone, actually, I just need to wait for that to happen, I came down. And that's that gap that you talk about, is giving yourself enough space to go, hang on a minute, do I need to react? Those knee-jerk actions or
Mm,
knee-jerk reactions when actually you do need to. And
mm,
other times when we just need to step back. Do you know what, Paul? You're so right. Social media we talk about this all the time. Honestly, if we could just stop social media for 6 months, I think the world might be a better place because we'd all just go, hang on a minute, what do I want? Hang on a minute, what's important to me? Does this even have an impact on me?